And away we go. Alright, let's see what goes on in the news at this time of week. And the second thing. Piers Morgan fractures leg after tripping on small step in London restaurant. TV presenter and journalist Piers Morgan, 60, is recovering from hip replacement surgery after fracturing his femur after tripping over a small step in a London hotel restaurant. In a post on Twitter X, Morgan jokingly blamed the accident on former US President Donald Trump. In the past, Morgan has expressed interest in becoming the British Prime Minister, proposing policies like a 1% tax for the NHS and penalties on French imports over migrant boats. A hot take. I'm not sure if anyone has even proposed a 1% tax on anything, let alone the NHS. Either way, I'd take a 1% tax over any other tax rate above it. That's just my opinion. Even if people argue we need money so the government provides services. The government of any country, surely they will have more than enough money to provide public services for its own people. Anyway, I'm going off the rails just a bit. No, actually going off way off. Oh dear, Piers Morgan tripped over. He hurt his foot on a step in a London hotel restaurant. And now he's blaming President Trump for all of this madness. Oh no. Uh, usually I'll be laughing my arse off, but I think my humor has broken so much beyond anything, really. But not lie, it's a bit of a ha-ha moment. Just blaming blaming a small problem on a particular person that has no idea this even happened to begin with. I didn't know this happened until now, and I know for sure that not many people in this world knows either that Piers Morgan had tripped over and hurt his foot. I will say that at least it's good to know that Piers Morgan is okay. He is recovering quite well, and he continued living life. Otherwise, whatever goes, it goes. Will Piers Morgan become Prime Minister of the UK? No. At least not now, or in the next decade. But if he does, I think the question needs to be asked: are there any other good candidates that would have ever had a chance to become Prime Minister? Or are the other parties that could have their party be the next UK government? What was in it for them? Were they not up to the job? Were there thresholds that were subpar, below massively of expectation? Or maybe it's an unknown factor relating to world events that has drastically changed our lives forever, ever. Well, who knows? Now, most likely, Piers Morgan will not be the next UK Prime Minister, but if at any point he does, you got to ask the question: what was up with the other party leaders? What were they doing to propose changes to the UK? Why were they not firm on their ideas? Or maybe it's more about a character issue, like the particular party leaders in question aren't that likable, or they're just being exposed for saying one thing a couple of years ago, only to realize, fast forward into the future, they did something that they are spoken against. So, in other words, hypocrisy in its finest. So yeah, that's all I have to say on that. Most Obamacare enrollment closes, leaving Americans with higher bills or less health insurance. On Thursday, open enrollment for most federally subsidized ACA marketplace plans ends, with new counts showing fewer Americans signing up after enhanced subsidies expired this year. Enhanced pandemic-era tax credits expired at year-end, and the US Congress remains divided after the House passed a 3-year extension on January 8th, but the Senate blocked it amid abortion/Hyde Amendment disputes. Preliminary CMS data shows 22.8 million enrolled for 2026. about 800,000 fewer than last year, while KFF found average premiums rising to $1,904 from $888 in 2025. Some consumers report they can't afford coverage, and officials warn true termination rates won't be known until April, said Nicholas Riggs and Michelle Ebrul. Health experts say the decline could grow in coming months. The Congressional Budget Office predicts 2 million more uninsured this year, and Pennsylvania's $50 million pledge falls short of the $600 million in previous subsidies. So, now I'm not saying this is the end of Obamacare. However, even there are people in this world that do want to provide affordable healthcare to everyone across the globe. There's always a cost. If there's any other reason that could be resolved, I would want to, but there isn't. There is a cost to not just in terms of finance, but also the labor coming from the workers in healthcare. And even if there is enough money at the federal level to provide healthcare to millions of Americans, only relying on federal level support is not going to be enough, nor will it ever be likely to be given to people across the US. I have said a couple episodes ago about what happened in Maui. People in Maui lost their homes and they've asked the federal government for support, which they are fulfilling to some extent. But I asked, where's Hawaii in this? Doesn't Hawaii have its own equivalent of providing support across the entire state of Hawaii? And I'd say the same here with Obamacare. I'm not against providing support to people in most dire need. You have to ask, who is providing support? Is there enough? Is there enough in the finances to provide such support? And if not, who else could people go to get somewhat similar equivalent support? I would say even the states in the US should provide something equivalent to what the federal level provides for all Americans. Even people would argue that the federal level has a much bigger budget. The chances of such support being given to anyone is much lower than it would be at a state level. Because if you get support from a state level, it may not be much, but at least you know you have a chance, much more so than at a federal level, to get the support you need. That I will say. And of course, if Risk was on here, he would say something along the lines of that universal healthcare is not a good idea. We shouldn't be putting money towards providing healthcare if there are people that have the money to pay for it for themselves. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad idea, but also not saying it's a good idea either. I think healthcare bills in the US is just too expensive. What kind of costs US healthcare would charge hundreds of thousands of dollars, not just in the total, but for a specific item like the doctors' salaries, the cost for the healthcare equipment, and even renting out the room where you're being treated. I understand there is cost to everything, but such costs like that is far too much for anyone, and especially if someone has been in a very dire situation. Someone had severely injured themselves physically. No one should be thinking about how much money they could afford for healthcare. No one should be thinking of that if they're in a very vulnerable situation. Forget the RAM crisis. Are we headed for a full-blown GPU crisis? Rumored production cuts for Nvidia GPUs make it seem more likely. On January 15th, 2026, Leaker, mega-sized GPU, posted on Twitter X claiming Nvidia cut GeForce GPU production by 15 to 20%, and no new GeForce or Blackwell gaming GPUs will launch this year. Memory shortages and DDR5's GDDR7 price spikes squeeze supply, and Nvidia shifts capacity toward more profitable AI accelerators, working with suppliers to maximize memory availability. Third-party listings show GeForce RTX 5070 Ti GPUs priced at $1,249 or $1,499 on Newegg, while the Acer Nitro 60 pre-built gaming PC includes the card for $1,799.99 after a $500 discount. PC builders face reduced availability and higher prices for RTX 5000 series cards as a 20% production cut threatens stock, and the article advised buying now to avoid scarcity. Mega-sized GPU warned RTX 6000 cards aren't imminent, and next-gen Nvidia GPU timing is uncertain, while Nvidia's lack of RTX 5000 Super news at CES 2026 fuels delay rumors. AMD's David McAfee said Team Red has strategic DRAM deals, but faces similar VRAM constraints. Now, before I say anything, just generally, on this story, I came across a particular TikTok video talking about the rising prices of just any computer PC components of any sorts. And what this expert has said is that the reason why prices for GPUs, CPUs, or anything that a PC would ever use, the prices of those components would go high, is because of fear that there won't be any left. Whilst there will be limited availability for these components, if everyone has this mindset, believing, oh no, there won't be enough left, I'm going to buy it right now before it's too late, then the price is going to be not either double or even triple what the price would originally be, even after considering the rising demand with limited supply. Yes, prices for computer components will be high. However, they won't be as high than what prices for such components will never be as high than what people believe will be, given that there will be a handful of people that have the mindset of buying something now to ensure that they don't have to buy the same components that would be triple the price that would be triple the price than what they had originally bought it for. If I was in this situation, I would not worry about buying something now because there's limited availability. The reason why there will be experts that would say that there are limited availability for computer or electronic components is so that if people believe there's limited supply, people go into panic mode where they would believe they have to buy something now before it's too late. But they're not asking about, do people actually need it now, or do they have the mindset of buying something now because of this kind of scare? If you're going to buy something that you believe that you need now because of prices about to go up, if you wait till later, I would just say do not buy something now if you're only going to buy something because the price that it's at now is the lowest it will be in the coming few months. What would happen in the next few months after that, and a few months after that, going so on and so forth, the prices for those computer components like GPUs, CPUs, memory cards, etc., they go down. And whatever the price it goes down to is actually much cheaper than what the price of those computer components you bought them for. That's the point I'm making. You can buy it now, saving a couple $100 than what most people would usually buy that could have buy those computer components for, if given the next few days or few months when prices become triple or quadruple, or then whatever at the quadruple the prices that you'd bought it for. But then fast forward a couple months after, the prices go back to normal because the scare is over. And then prices go down again, just a little bit, and now the prices to buy such computer components that you want are now much cheaper than the price that you paid to get those computer components. When people say, "Oh, there's a scare, you need to buy something now," I would not buy it. Do not buy it now. Give it at least a week. If prices go high, but you don't actually need it yet, don't bother buying it now, especially if the price is too high. And also, even if there is a scare and there is limited availability, the the supply will be restocked again in a couple months. And then by the time people realize that, A, people won't panic anymore, thinking there isn't enough left or available for anyone to use whatever components they want to use it for. Secondly, once once the buying scare is over, prices will go down to a price that is somewhat cheaper than the price that you originally bought these components for. That would be my advice for buying anything in general. Don't buy something because you're being pressured to, or because the price that it's at now is the cheapest it will ever be. You know that price is just going to go down again, and then maybe a few years down the line, when the demand for said product actually goes down significantly, gradually over the next few years, the price of that product would likely be slightly cheaper than the price that you originally last saw that product at when you last saw it, or even bought it at. You never know how cheap things will get after the the panic of buying something now before prices get too high. And especially in the next few years when demand for said product drops gradually or significantly because cultural shifts demand that such products like this aren't are neither a necessity nor a desire for most people anymore. When is the last time you heard people saying, "I want to buy this new TV, but oh my gosh, it's too expensive"? When was the last time you've heard people panicking about buying a television, a flat screen HD television, or even a 4K television, but you're not sure if to buy it now so that you don't buy it later when the price gets too high? It's been years I've heard discussions like that, and even if there are, well, I don't know what else to think at that point. I think people these days, if they want to buy something that they can watch movies on, like a television, people would go on TikTok Shop to buy a projector, which more than serves just a television, it could also be used to browse the internet. And I'm not sure what else people would use a projector for, but I'm not talking about these rectangular heavy projectors that's used in schools. A handheld, very portable, like light enough that you can carry it in your own hand, that you could just project the screen onto the wall, not just to watch movies or shows on any streaming service of your choice, but you could also surf the web on it and even use the projector to. You can even connect your phone to these projectors, showcasing whatever's on your phone onto that projector on a wall. So there's so many purposes. And because products like that what's the point in getting a television, regardless of what the resolution is? It could be 8K it could be an 8K television, but if it doesn't allow you to project whatever's displaying on your phone or iPad, then what's the point? And especially if you can't carry it with you wherever you are around the world. Again, this is society is shifting to another level of convenience. Not just so it's easy for us, it is also affordable. So if we lose it or break said projector or handheld product, you just go on TikTok shop again and get it for, I don't know, $30, 30 quid. I think $30 would be cheaper than 30 quid. Either way, yeah, that doesn't get doesn't get simpler or nor convenient than that. If you're gonna buy something, at least give it a few weeks or even a month or two. And if the prices are still the same, then yeah, you can buy it. But if prices get too high, still add a couple more weeks or months until eventually, and it will happen at some point, prices for computer components like RAM, GPUs, CPUs, memory cards, etc., they get down to a price to the point you are able to afford it and still have money left over to cover costs of everyday necessities. Don't scare yourself into buying something now because prices will go up the later you wait for to buy something. Just just wait a few months to see if prices change afterwards to a price that is affordable to you. That I will say. Matt Damon says Netflix is rewriting movie structure for distracted viewers. On Friday, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck told the Joe Rogan Experience that Netflix asked for a big action set piece within the first 5 minutes to keep viewers tuned in. Because home viewers split attention, at-home viewing yields much lower attention than theaters with lights on and distractions, and streamers have discussed, reiterating the plot 3 or 4 times for phone-distracted audiences. Damon explained that the standard way to make an action movie involves 3 set pieces, with the most money spent on the third act, which is considered the finale. Affleck and Damon secured performance-based bonuses for the Rip's crew, a departure from Netflix's usual upfront pay model, with the film's plot centered on $20 million stash house cash. Damon cautioned that Netflix's shift could really start to infringe on how we're telling these stories, while Affleck noted Adolescence, Netflix limited series, as proof that streamers don't need such tactics. So what I'm getting at is people's attention spans are absolutely crap, and that something has to be told to them 3 or 4 times until eventually I get what this movie's about. And then the movie ends, and that's it. People know what the movie is until the very end. Who else is to blame besides social media about attention spans from content from those platforms? I know there's something else. I just can't prove it yet. Maybe it's the content in question which these people are watching on. They're so dazzled and extravagant by these colorful elements and quick frame changes that if you watch anything else where you have to pay attention to a particular scene for more than 7 or 8 seconds, and people already, okay, I'm lost. Okay, I'm not interested anymore. Let's watch something else. Yeah, you're cooked. You are so cooked. Unbelievable. How can you not pay attention to more than 5 seconds of anything without you going to get your remote or your phone, flipping channels or scrolling on your phone. If you can't do that, then something's wrong with your brain. And I say the same for myself. At times I thought, oh, okay, I lost interest. But no, I gotta keep going because there is more to whatever I'm watching. There's always more to what I'm watching. At times I was close to scrolling after 5 seconds, but I still keep going. I really try to. This is embarrassing. The fact Netflix has said these people aren't paying attention to what these movies are about, so we have to wait till the very end until we actually make it clear. But also have to tell them 3 or 4 more times until towards the very end until people get it. That's what Netflix are saying. They are saying that whatever movies they're making, they have to repeat the same plot or repeat key elements of that particular movie plot 3 or 4 times before people that are watching the movie understand what the movie's about. You cannot tolerate this kind of momentum. You can't just make changes to how stories are told because people can't pay attention to more than 5 seconds of anything. If anything, you need to address the root cause of why Netflix is doing something like this to begin with. People's attention spans are so crap. You need colorful palettes. No more than 5 seconds of any shot. Click, 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 and so on. It's just embarrassing. At that point, anyone who can't pay, anyone who is like that, who needs less than 5 seconds of shot changes, they need colorful elements or palettes to draw their attention to something, or even have to have the same elements or the same sentences repeated to them multiple times. That is embarrassing. That is so sad. Outrageous. And it doesn't matter which generation it is, or whatever generations are involved, whether it be millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, even Gen Beta, if they're old enough to cognitively use an iPad, that's for sure. Actually, I'm not sure if there are any Gen Betas right now that are old enough to use an iPad. Maybe not now as of this recording, but maybe a few years from now, maybe Gen Beta will be able to use an iPad, just like Gen Alpha has a couple of years ago. And okay, I've already said enough about Gen Alpha and all the other generations. But regardless of what generation is involved in this attention span epidemic, it's a problem. It's ridiculous that movie studios make changes to how movies are made because people attention spans are getting worse and gradually declining over time. If anything's going to be changing, it is to encourage people to pay attention to stuff, improving people's attention spans. But they're not going to do that because that doesn't make them money. And these movie studios and streaming platforms, they're going to make the bank. So the reason why Netflix are saying, like, repeat plots 3 or 4 times is so that people that are watching these movies understand what's going on, so that they could potentially watch the movie again if they're interested. Well, that's if people understand what the movie's about, or even they're paying attention to it, that is. Yet that I think there are bigger issues than what the movie's about, and especially a bigger problem than just what the viewers are doing whilst watching the movie, or if they could understand them. Baloney. Absolute baloney. Outrageous. Power outage halts Tokyo commuter train lines, affecting 673,000 passengers. On Friday, East Japan Railway Company, JR East, said all services on the Yamanote and Keihin Tohoku lines were suspended, causing major transit disruption and stranding thousands of commuters during the morning rush. Railway staff first discovered the outage shortly before 4 a.m., attributing it to a substation power transfer attempt, while a fire near Tamachi Station at about 8 a.m. is under investigation. The Keien Tohoku line briefly resumed around 7 a.m., but was suspended again, while firefighters and rail staff evacuated stranded passengers, and 5 people were taken to hospital. Goodness. Well, the important thing is, no one has died, and for the 5 people that are in hospital, I hope they recover rapidly. I hope those 5 in hospital are recovering quite well. And who knows? Maybe this isn't the first time that Tokyo has experienced a power outage or have a fire. Although not 2 at the same time. That could be rare. Otherwise, Japan as a whole, they got things under control. They know how to deal with emergencies, how to tackle suspenseful, stressful situations, and to get situations under wraps and contain problems before they get worse. So, typical Japan, getting problems under control before things get out of hand. Although I wouldn't be surprised if people in Japan say that Tokyo doesn't have the high standards of tackling issues like Osaka or Hokkaido or other lesser known cities in Japan. I wouldn't be surprised if people in Japan said something like that. But still, but especially what's happening in Tokyo, it's still far higher standards of tackling problems than other countries or cities around the world. A US military strike in northwest Syria killed an Al-Qaeda affiliate leader, linked to an attack that killed 2 US soldiers and an interpreter last month. The US launched airstrikes against ISIS targets in Syria in retaliation for the December attack and conducted large-scale strikes against over 100 ISIS sites in Operation Hawkeye Strike. The US Central Command commander urged the Syrian government to stop attacks and pursue resolution through dialogue for regional peace and stability. This story sounds familiar. I've heard something going on in Syria, but I'm just not sure. Forcefully in Syria clashes. There we go. The US should intervene more forcefully to end a Syrian offensive that has gained key territory from Kurdish fighters in recent days. The head of the main Kurdish forces told Reuters. Government troops launched an offensive on Saturday into territory run for the last decade by semi-autonomous Kurdish authorities in the northeast of Syria, capturing towns on both sides of the Euphrates River, as well as the country's largest oil field and a gas field, officials and security sources said. Of course, it all makes sense now. You know, I actually knew a guy. I went to high school with this lad, who's ethnically Kurdish. Now, of course, at the time that me and this lad were doing an induction transition day at the high school we went to, a few people at my high school questioned about his ethnicity. He said it was Kurdish. This was at the time when this was at the height in the earlier years of the civil war in Syria, which has now ended in December 2025. And when people heard about his Kurdish ancestry, the rest with that lad is history. As in, a lot of people at my high school unanimously hated on that lad. Not just because he's Kurdish, but also because he was kind of a knobhead. He was quite a nuisance to everyone. His Kurdish ancestry was just like the start of it. I don't think people talked about his Kurdish ancestry since then, when we did the transition day, like the year before that we both started the same high school together. But that's just what I've heard from whatever knowledge that I apparently know. So anyway, back to the story about the Kurdish commander calling on US to intervene forcefully. I don't have a strong opinion on this, although I am curious about what I do wonder what the sovereign nation of Kurdistan would look like. And that is the name for a hypothetical sovereign state consisting of Kurdish people, from what I just looked into a while ago. I am curious if Kurdistan does become a sovereign nation. If that's possible, then I'd like to see that go ahead. Of course, Syria, Turkey, at least those two, maybe Iran, but certainly Syria and Turkey, they have oppositions against Kurdistan being a nation, but I like to see it happen. I'm just curious. I have no motive. I don't have an agenda. I'm just curious. I want to see what the nation of Kurdistan looks like and how those people, the Kurdish people, go on about their lives. I really want to see how this goes. Even if there is negative connotations or headlines coming from such people in the not so distant future, again, I'm still curious to see how a nation of Kurdistan looks like and how that nation would operate. And at least it actually it also builds on dialogue for such people of Kurdistan. Lamar Odom, a former NBA player, was arrested and booked for driving under the influence on January 17th in Las Vegas. In addition to the DUI charge, Odom was charged with speeding and improper lane change. Odom previously faced a misdemeanor DUI charge in 2013 and suffered a near-fatal drug overdose in 2015. That's it. That's the story. And even then, that's all you need to know. That is all you need to know. Oh boy. Look, I'm not gonna argue with whatever substance you're on. I would, I would still warn people that if you're on something, do not overdose on it, because it's not just bad for your health, but it will land you in severe trouble many years down the line. It's just not worth it, guys. Don't do drugs. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I did some myself, but that was many years ago. And if anyone asks, I would say, nah, I'm good. Not just because of the issues, and especially with this story. It's just I just don't get it. I just don't feel anything with them. But anyway, that's just me. So, NBA player, former NBA player, arrested for DUI. Is anyone surprised? And especially anyone that pays attention to the NBA and has seen this guy being arrested before. Surely they're not surprised. They knew this was going to happen. That is that. Carney says Chinese EV deal an opportunity for Ontario auto sector. China, Canada's second largest trading partner, imposed steep tariffs on Canadian agricultural goods in retaliation for Canada's tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. Canadian Prime Minister Carney said Beijing agreed to remove tariffs on some Canadian goods and offer visa-free travel, describing the electric vehicle deal as an opportunity for Ontario's auto sector. Ties between Canada and China were strained after China detained two Canadians in 2018, seen as retaliation for Canada's arrest of a Huawei executive wanted in the US. Now, I'm not sure what the outrage is with China opposing tariffs on Canada, but I've heard a lot about the US opposing their tariffs on many European countries that are opposing the purchase or a deal regarding Greenland. I've had so much, I've had so many people saying the United States shouldn't buy Greenland. Greenland should be its own nation. Actually, I've heard those people in Greenland, whilst they want to govern for themselves, yet they still want to be part of the Kingdom of Denmark. not just because of historical ties, mainly because if Greenland becomes their own independent nation, there's a lot of support in terms of finances, defense, and other geopolitical benefits. They'll just vanish if Greenland becomes their own nation, independent from the Kingdom of Denmark. Denmark has so many benefits, not just for their own people, but for people in Greenland as well. And because of those benefits, it's why Greenland says, we want to be under the Kingdom of Denmark. We still want to govern for ourselves, but we still want to remain under the Kingdom of Denmark, they say. And you know what? Fair enough. If Denmark has so much to offer for Greenland, then I don't see why they shouldn't. I don't see why they shouldn't continue providing such support. Which they should, because I can't imagine what Greenland. I can't imagine how Greenland would operate if they didn't have the defense from the Danish military and other financial benefits coming from the Danish government. And actually, if the US was to get hold of Greenland and the Greenland becomes an incorporated territory of the United States, I think I would, in my opinion, I would say that I'm not saying, I am not saying, I can't stress this enough. I am not saying Greenland should be part of the US. If Greenland decides they want to be part of the US, whatever benefits Greenland is getting from Denmark, getting benefits from the US, similar, would be much bigger. No matter how little or how much support the US provides for Greenlandic people, even the littlest amount of support that the US government provides for Greenland, just like with all of its territories in the world, at worst, they'll get roughly the same amount of benefits than the same amount of benefits that they're receiving from Denmark, or best case scenario, Greenland receives triple or quadruple the amount of benefits from the US as opposed to Denmark. But of course, it is down to the people of Greenland what they want to do. Do they want to remain a part of Denmark or join the US? Most Greenlandic people want to stay with Denmark. If that's what they want, I don't see what else is there to talk about, especially given the history. Greenland wants to stay part of Denmark. We should allow Greenland to stay part of Denmark if a majority of Greenlandic people want that to be the case. So I'd say leave it at that. However, the US, they're still going to keep at it until they get exactly what they want, even if it means charging tariffs on countries that oppose such a deal regarding Greenland. It's gonna be a long ride with this, that's for sure. And that is it for the episode.